Good afternoon. This is the Monroe Street Bikeway study. This is the phase 2 community workshops. We'll be presenting some roadway concepts today. So next slide, please. So thank you for being here. My name is Ralph Garcia with the City of Santa Clara. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the project website. There's several ways to connect with the project team via voicemail at 408-320-7060. You can also send an email at monroestudy@altago.com. You can visit the project website via santaclaraca.gov/bipedprojects. And then the project website is also a survey is available on the project website as well. And then there's a QR code if you want to click on that. Next slide. So for today's agenda, we'll do some brief introductions of the project team. We'll go over the project and what activities have been completed to date. We'll share some results of the parking and collision analysis the project team has completed. We'll look at some concept designs for the project. We'll have an opportunity for question and answers at the end. And then we'll provide the next steps in this project. So once again, I'm Ralph Garcia, project manager for this Monroe Street project. Some other members on the city side include Michael Liu, the Assistant Public Works Director, Steve Chan, the Transportation Manager, Carol Shariat, the Principal Transportation Planner, and Nicole He, Associate Civil Engineer. Also joining us today is Alta Planning and Design, our traffic consultant for this project. And I would like to introduce Ben Frazier, who will be leading you the rest of the way on the project slides. Ben, please introduce your team if you want.
Sure. Thank you, Ralph. Good afternoon, everybody. Oops, sorry, hit the mouse wheel. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, I'm Ben Frazier. I'm an associate planner of Alta Planning and Design, and I'm joined here with Katrina Ortiz, a landscape designer on our team who helped design some of these concepts. I'm looking forward to speaking with y'all this afternoon. So before we dive in, just a couple of Zoom reminders. You might have had an opportunity to change your Zoom name when you joined. So if your Zoom name is already your first name, you're good to go there. But if not, feel free to hit the participants tab and change your name that way, just so it's a little easier to interact later on in the Q&A session. At the bottom of the Zoom box, you will see a Q&A box, and there throughout the entire presentation, you can leave any questions or comments you have on any of the concepts or anything else I'm discussing throughout the presentation. Some items might be responded to with text in the middle of the presentation, but other items we might get to at the Q&A session at the end, so feel free to leave items in there throughout the presentation. And then lastly, at the end of the presentation, after I go over the concepts, we will have an open Q&A session where you can unmute yourself and talk to us. So you won't see that right now, but a little later on, you'll see a raised hand button, and there you can click that. That'll raise your hand to let us know that you want to speak, and then we can unmute you, and then you can share any thoughts or comments you have. So that'll be a little later on in the Q&A session. So with that, I just kind of want to dive right into the project. So what is the plan process of this Monroe Bikeway study? So it's a 4-phase process, and right now we're in the middle of phase 2. The first phase was information gathering and existing conditions analysis. So this is when we gathered a lot of data along the corridor, whether that was looking at past plans and city policies, collecting traffic data, parking data, all that kind of good stuff is what we collected in phase 1. And then in phase 2, where we are now, we're developing and sharing roadway concepts. Our designers and landscapes, they work with the city to design some draft corridor concepts that I'll share with you a little later in this presentation. And we're gathering feedback from community members right now. And then in the next phase, we'll take these concepts and we'll revise them, and then we'll also share the different traffic and parking analysis that we've conducted that'll help kind of quantify some of the different impacts that these concepts might have, and we'll share all of that information back with you. And then in a final phase, the plan will go before the City Council for their review and consideration to see if they wish to move forward with any of the concepts. Here's that kind of project schedule in more of a graphic form. We're kind of right in the middle of community work, of community engagement phase 2. This is Monroe workshop number 4. This will be the final workshop in phase 4, and we have a couple of other engagement tasks in this phase. And then, as I alluded to in the last slide, in that third phase, we'll come back to you with revised concepts and with some of that traffic and parking analysis to see what the impacts of these concepts might be and how you feel about those. So now let's kind of dive right into the study area today. So the project area is Monroe Street between Lawrence and San Tomas Expressways. You can kind of see that here on the map. The corridor is primarily fronted by residential uses, and you also have and then we also have Wilcox High right in the middle on the south side of the corridor by Calabasas. So in terms of roadway characteristics, between Lawrence and San Tomas Expressway, it's a 1.7 mile east-west segment. The road is 4 to 5 lanes. The posted speed limit is 35 miles an hour. There are small segments of existing bike lanes in some segments of the corridor, but there is no continuous facility along the entire length of the project study area. And as I mentioned, the corridor is primarily fronted by houses, and there are also lots of schools in the area, including Wilcox High, that directly fronts the corridor. So in terms of other community engagement activities, what have we completed to date? In our first community engagement phase, we had 2 other virtual workshops. These workshops were noticed with 1,000 postcards that were sent out to all addresses within about a half-mile buffer of the corridor. Same with this phase of workshops. We had a pop-up event along the San Tomas Aquino Creek Trail at the Agnew Trailhead during Bike to Work Day, where we were able to talk to over 30 people biking by and share their feedback on the different corridors. Their existing conditions feedback on the different corridors. And then we also had an online community survey that allowed community members to share their feedback on how they feel about Monroe right now and what their kind of vision and goals are for the corridor in the future. And that survey had about 70 responses. And also, as I alluded to earlier, we did a lot of the existing conditions data collection that included traffic counts, turning movements and travel time, parking utilization data. We've conducted a collision analysis, and we also had a site visit where we walked parts of the corridor, and we also observed an afternoon pickup time near Wilcox High. So what were the overall top engagement themes that we heard through the first community engagement phase? The community wants safe, comfortable bicycle facilities that stretch the entire corridor. Improved pedestrian and bicycle crossings. There are a lot of connecting facilities that cross Monroe Street, so we want to make sure that it's easy to cross the street, both for people walking and biking. And then also improve connections to the San Tomas Creek Trail. This is something we heard a lot across all our different forms of community engagement. You know, we want to the creek crossing is right now not very comfortable for a lot of people, so they want that improved to feel safer and more comfortable when they are. So now I want to dive a little deeper into the collision and parking analyses that we've completed for the corridor. So starting with the collision analyses, we studied collision data for collisions between 2017 and 2022. And these numbers are just for collisions on Monroe Street itself. And so I'll also be within the project segment between San Tomas and Lawrence Expressways, between those 5-year period, there were 114 motor vehicle collisions. There were 9 collisions that involved someone biking, and then 7 collisions that involved someone walking. And you can kind of see where the different collisions were kind of along the corridor. You see kind of a thicker spike here, see a little spike here by the high school, and then kind of a nice spread kind of along the eastern segment of the corridor. Diving a little bit deeper into that collision data, throughout the corridor, there were unfortunately 2 fatal collisions. One was a pedestrian fatality at Augusta Place, and the other was what was a vehicle fatality from a collision at Francis Ave. There were 3 collisions with severe injuries, and in terms of collision factors, things that kind of lead toward or reasons why collisions happen, the top noted factor was unsafe speed, with that representing 37 of the collisions. Now moving on to parking data. In terms of the parking data, as I mentioned, we collected parking data over a 4-day period in April of earlier this year. We collected data on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday during various peak periods that included 7 to 9 a.m., 11 to 2, and then also overnight, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. And we collected counts about every half hour during those time frames. Data was collected both on Monroe Street itself and also 500 feet on every cross street within the project area. So let me just break that data down for you really quickly. So in terms of parking on the north side of Monroe Street, there's a total of 201 spaces available. And on average, 79 of those spaces were available, or about 39%, used. On the south side of the street, there's 118 spaces currently available, and on average, 43 of them were used for a 36% utilization rate. And then looking at the corridor as a whole, combining the north and the south, that's a total of 319 spaces, of which 122 are used on average for an average utilization of about 38%. And then looking at all the different side streets, combined, all of the side streets along the corridor have 884 parking spaces within the first 500 feet. And based off of that, we observed on average 328 vehicles parked there for an average utilization of about 37%. And here's that data kind of displayed on a map. And you can kind of see there are segments along the corridor where there is no parking available. That's kind of these gray areas. But you can see where there is parking generally along Monroe itself, utilization is below 50%. Parking does get tighter in the western segment of the corridor, including on the side streets. But similarly, on the eastern side, much like Monroe, some of the side streets are not that heavily utilized, under 50% as well. So now let's go ahead and dive into the corridor concepts themselves. So just another quick little overview of the corridor. Predominantly, Monroe Street is 64 feet wide for pretty much its entirety. And then we also have the expressways, which are owned by the county on either end. So there are a couple atypical segments along the corridor we just want to quickly bring to your attention. As I mentioned, there are a couple segments on the corridor that do have standard bike lanes right now, and that's 4 lanes in each direction with the standard 5 feet bike lane on either side. And one of the main reasons we want to try to upgrade these facilities to buffered bike lanes is to provide that additional comfort and safety factor to make people feel more comfortable, especially for a lot of the students and the high school students going to and from the high school. So with that said, here is the main 64-foot segment of Monroe Street. Let me see if I can get my magnifying glass working. So currently, as it stands, the street is 4 lanes in each direction, with parking on both sides. The travel lanes are between 11 and 12 feet, and there's 9 feet of parking on either side of the street. And right now, there are currently no bicycle facilities in this particular roadway configuration. So moving on to the first concept, concept 1. This concept will reduce travel lanes by 1, providing you 1 lane in each direction with a 2-way center turn lane, and it will provide buffered bike lanes. You zoom in on this. So in this case, we've gone from 4 travel lanes down to 3, 2 in each direction with a 2-way center turn lane. And the 2-way center turn lane is great for a lot of reasons because it provides both safety and also efficiency benefits. So in terms of safety, what the 2-way center turn lane does is it removes the multi-point threat. If, for example, you wanted to make a left turn into one of these driveways, as it stands now, you would have to stop in that inner travel lane, and there's a risk that someone could come into you because they're not expecting someone to stop. But with a 2-way turn lane, you can pull into here, out of the 3-lane of traffic, and then wait for the other direction to clear, and then you're able to more easily and safely pull into your driveway. Similarly, if you were trying to exit, you can now do that one direction of travel at a time for space for you to safely wait in the middle. Additionally, with 1 travel lane in each direction, that allows us to add buffered bike lanes. So we still retain parking on both sides with 8 feet apart, with an 8 feet parking lane on each side. And then we also have a 5-foot bike lane with a 3-foot buffer. And then a couple of other things to know about these designs. As parking is maintained, we have additional buffers around each driveway. This will increase visibility as you're entering and exiting the driveway, both for cars and bikes that might be going by. And also these buffer areas also serve as good spaces where you can store your trash cans, waste receptacles, or other items that are out of the bike lane and also out of the parking space and off the sidewalk. So this is concept one, buffered bike lanes by losing one travel. The second concept, concept two, we still reduce travel lanes in that same one travel lane in each direction with a two-way center turn lane, but we've swapped the bike lanes and the parking along the curb. So in this case, we still have one travel lane in each direction with the two-way center turn lane, but what we've done is now the bike lane is against the curb and the parking is out floating a little bit. So here we have a curbside bike lane, still 5 feet with a 3-foot buffer, but now the parking is out floating and this creates a parking protected bike. And this is a safer option for people biking, as it now provides a physical barrier between themselves and moving traffic, and also just a greater distance between them and moving traffic, even if no parked vehicle is there at the time. And a few other things to note, similarly with the other design, we still have those buffers along driveways for visibility. That would be especially important if there's a parked car in the area. And those buffer areas can also still serve waste receptacles and other items. And also when there are a couple spots along the corridor where there might be some bus stops. So if that would be the case, we can see here the mixing zones and how that bus would then mix and how those buses and bikes would then mix. So this is concept two, parking protected bike lanes by removing one travel. And then the third concept, and in this particular case, we retain all 4 travel lanes, but we lose parking on one side of the street. Let me zoom in again for you. So in this case, we retain all 4 of the existing travel lanes, but here we remove parking on one side of the street, and which side of the street that is on has not been determined, and if the city does proceed down this path, that will be determined in a later design phase, whether that's the north side or the south side. That's not a design detail that this particular study will determine. But with parking removed on one side of the street, that then allows you to maintain all 4 travel lanes, but you get your 5-foot bike lane, but you do get a slightly smaller, only 2-foot buffer, where in the first 2 designs, that buffer was 3 feet. And so in this particular case here, on the side where parking is retained, we still keep those driveway buffers, but on the side where there is no parking, those are not present. So this is concept 3. And there is one more segment we would like to show you. And this is the segment of Monroe that's in front of Wilcox itself. And because there's such a strong Safe Routes to School focus as a part of this project, this one particular segment, we're already going ahead and we would like to suggest parking protected bike lanes. And you can see it a little bit here. Let me get my magnifying glass. You can see it here on the school side of the street. We do have a raised device here. What that specific device is will be determined in a later design phase, but there would be a protected bike lane on that school side to really hammer home the Safe Routes to School for all the kids who bike to and from the high school, because we know there are a lot of kids who bike, and this is to make sure that they can get where they're going very safely. So this is the other segment that we're covering. And so with that, we would love to get your feedback on any and all of these concepts, and you're welcome to share that live during the Q&A session, and also using the survey that Katrina has shared out in chat. And so let me go ahead. So feel free to answer. So feel free to put any questions you have in the Q&A box, or feel free to. And Kaz, can you turn on the raised hand function, please? The raised hand function should come online shortly. So if you'd like to speak out loud, go ahead and raise your hand and we can go ahead and unmute you. Let's see. Okay, I see one question has come in through the Q&A box. Let's see. What studies have been made on the relative safety of parking protected bike lanes versus bike lanes outside of the parking? So yes, so studies have shown that the parking protected facilities or in fact any separated bikeway does have clear safety benefits over standard buffered bike lanes where there is no type of physical barrier. We see that, it's not only both for perceived safety and comfort, but also statistically there are fewer collisions where these facilities have been implemented. Now with that said, a lot of intricate design needs to go into these facilities to ensure that the visibility these sight lines are very good, because where we have seen some issues with these in the past have been at intersections, for example, where there hasn't been enough, where you've left, where, you know, some jurisdictions have left a little too much parking. So as the bicyclist goes through, you know, they're not as visible as they would like to be. So there are certain design considerations that do need to be accounted for, but those will be accounted for in that later design phase when they kind of get into the nitty gritty, if that parking protected facility is the way to go. But statistically speaking, they have been shown to be significantly safer than other facility types. Anything else you'd like to add on to that, Ralph?
No, I think that's correct, Ben. I think you covered it.
Any other questions? Not seeing anything else in the Q&A box. Also, feel free to raise your hands. We're more than happy to unmute y'all if y'all want to speak. But while we wait for a few more questions to come in, oh, there's one. The section, question from the Q&A box, the section from Lawrence to Wilcox does not have bike lanes yet. When will this be implemented even as a pilot? Yes, that is correct. There are no bike lanes in that segment right now. And the purpose of the study is just to determine what the possible roadway configurations are that would enable that to happen. So there's a lot of steps that still need to be taken in terms of, you know, this being reviewed by further BPAC meetings and city council. And then beyond that, once they decide which approach they want to take, they then need to find additional funding for further design phases, and then they would need to find money to actually construct the facility. So those steps haven't been determined yet, as that funding hasn't necessarily been allocated yet. While we wait for a few more questions to come in, I'm going to go ahead and talk about a couple of next steps. In terms of future community engagement opportunities, we're kind of wrapping up the second phase of engagement. The survey is active and will continue to be active through around October 15th. So please go ahead and continue to share the word and promote that to all of your friends and neighbors. And we're also in the process of coordinating some high school specific events with Wilcox High, so that we can really get some detailed feedback from those student staff and faculty there. And then also, as I mentioned, we'll be back to the community again in the third phase in a couple of months for revised concepts with a lot of that detailed data analysis that we'll be able to quantify what some of those trade-off impacts are. And then lastly, here's again the schedule. So we will be back again in a few months in this phase 3 community engagement. We'll be back to the city's BPAC in January. So that's a meeting that's open to the public that you're also willing to attend as well. And I'll mention them again. Lots of ways to stay involved with the project. You can always stay up to date at the project website, santaclaraca.gov/bikeped projects. You can always send us an email, a project-specific email at monroestudy@altago.com. You can leave us a voicemail at 408-320-7060. And as always, you're welcome to attend any future community engagement including public meetings like the BPAC and future city council meetings as well. So if that, project staff will hang around for a few more minutes if anybody else has any additional comments or questions. But with that, we thank you so much for spending a couple minutes of your afternoon with us. We know how valuable your time is, and we appreciate you taking a few minutes of your Saturday with us. Thank you so much. We'll be around for a few minutes if you have any thoughts or questions.
Yes, this is Ralph Garcia, City of Santa Clara. I just want to thank you all for attending. And yeah, we'll be here if you have any questions. Please raise your hand or put them in the chat box.
All right, I'm not seeing anything else come in. So once again, thank you all so much for your time this afternoon. Plenty of ways to stay in touch with the project. Feel free to get in touch and leave your feedback on any of our other digital methods, and we'll see you next time. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Bye.